Have you ever wondered how far grief can push someone before they break completely? This story will take you through a journey of love, loss, and unimaginable tragedy that will leave you stunned until the very end. What happens when good people make terrible choices in the darkest moments of their lives? Stay with me to discover how one family's path to healing became a road to destruction. Rena had always believed life was a series of tests, but the hardest test came unexpectedly when she was only 34 years old. Her beloved husband, Tony, succumbed suddenly to cancer, leaving her and their 12-year-old daughter, Clara, alone in a world she barely understood how to navigate. Overnight, Rena transformed from a wife and mother into the sole guardian, the lone provider, bearing the heavy responsibility of nurturing her daughter amid the endless storm of grief. Those first few months after Tony's death were a blur, an endless cycle of mechanical existence. Wake up, make breakfast, send Clara to school, work 2 jobs, come home exhausted, try not to cry too loudly in the bathroom, pretend everything was fine for the sake of her daughter. Repeat. Every evening, when Rena tucked Clara into bed, she put on a brave face, masking the devastation rotting her from the inside. She promised herself she'd never let Clara feel the crushing weight she herself carried. But it was impossible to shield Clara entirely. The house, once lively with laughter and love, grew quieter, colder. Pictures of Tony remained framed on the walls, silent witnesses to the growing distance between mother and daughter, both trapped in their separate spirals of grief. Clara, once a vibrant, bubbly little girl, grew quieter, moodier. There were days Rena would find her staring blankly at Tony's photo, clutching it to her chest until she fell asleep. The loneliness, the missing warmth, seeped deep into Clara's soul like a toxin, and Rena, overwhelmed by bills, work stress, and her own broken heart, struggled to reach her daughter anymore. She told herself they just needed time. Time would heal the wounds. It had to. But time, as she soon realized, had a cruel sense of humor. Instead of healing, it stretched the distance between them even further. Years passed this way, dragging on like a slow-motion nightmare. Clara entered her teenage years in an emotional vacuum, trying to fill the gaping hole left behind by her father's absence. If you're finding this story moving, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Your support helps us bring more powerful narratives like this one to life. Now, let's continue with Rena and Clara's journey. She sought comfort in places she didn't fully understand: online spaces, media, relationships, things Rena only partially noticed but was too exhausted to confront properly. By the time Clara turned 18, she had built her own world, a lonely, hidden fortress of suppressed longing and confusion that Rena could barely glimpse from the outside. Meanwhile, Rena faced her own private battles. She wasn't just lonely, she was terrified that Clara would drift too far, terrified she was failing as a mother, terrified that life, which once seemed full of promise, had reduced her to this, an exhausted, hollow woman fighting every day just to keep breathing. It was around this time that Rena met Kevin. They met in the most ordinary way, through mutual friends at a small charity event in the city. Kevin wasn't flashy or overly charming, but he had something Rena hadn't encountered in a long time: kindness without expectation, warm eyes, a gentle smile, and most importantly, understanding. Kevin was a widower too. He had lost his wife 3 years earlier to a sudden illness, and he too carried invisible wounds that hadn't quite healed. He was raising 2 boys, Noah, 21, and Ricky, 19, navigating the complicated maze of single parenthood, just like Rena. They started talking. One conversation led to another. One coffee turned into several dinners. Shared sadness slowly turned into shared hope. It was clumsy at first, 2 broken people trying to piece together something resembling happiness. But it was real, and for the first time in years, Rena allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, a second chance at family wasn't impossible. After a year of dating, they decided to marry. The wedding was a simple, intimate affair. Clara stood by her mother's side in a delicate blue dress. Watching her mother exchange vows, with this new man who seemed to genuinely care for them. Noah and Ricky wore matching suits, both looking slightly uncomfortable but smiling nonetheless. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The families moved in together into Kevin's spacious home on the edge of town. At first, the transition went smoother than Rena had dared to hope. Meals were livelier. The house, once so oppressively silent, now echoed with casual conversations, video games blaring from the living room, Clara's laughter mingling with the boys' teasing. They adapted to each other surprisingly well. Clara found herself laughing more than she had in years. Noah, being the oldest, often helped with chores without being asked. Ricky, the more mischievous one, quickly bonded with Clara over their mutual love for bad horror movies and pranking Kevin at every opportunity. Kevin was patient, affectionate, a far cry from the careless men Rena had met in her lonely years after Tony's death. For a while, Rena allowed herself to believe they had finally outrun the shadow of the past. But what Kevin and Rena didn't know was that while adults heal with time, teenagers bleed differently. Clara and Ricky, close in age and temperament, shared a bond that subtly morphed into something more complex. Beneath their innocent, sibling-like teasing was an undercurrent of tension neither truly acknowledged. They would sometimes lock eyes for a second too long. Their jokes occasionally had an uncomfortable edge, and once curiosity mixes with adolescence, temptation finds its way through the cracks. Clara, having spent years seeking refuge online, had unknowingly developed a dangerous addiction to adult content. Late at night, in the privacy of her room, she explored darker corners of the internet, searching for something, anything, to numb the hollow ache inside her. It wasn't about lust, it was about filling the void. And Ricky, left to his own devices after the loss of his mother, had traveled down a similar road. He too drowned his loneliness in online fantasies, the images blurring the line between reality and desire. One seemingly insignificant day, a mistake changed everything. Ricky had been using his laptop in the living room, casually browsing explicit sites, too careless to properly close the browser. Clara, wandering downstairs to get a snack, caught a glimpse of the screen as she passed by. She froze. Ricky realized a second too late and slammed the laptop shut, face flushing deep red. They both stood there, paralyzed in shared embarrassment. Neither spoke, neither could look the other in the eye. Clara mumbled something unintelligible and rushed back upstairs, heart hammering in her chest. Ricky sat back down, face burning, filled with shame, but also a strange, lurking excitement. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The accidental glimpse had awakened something she had fought long to bury, a fascination, a craving she didn't know how to control. Days later, another opportunity presented itself. Ricky left the laptop open again, this time not so accidentally. Clara found herself drawn back to it, like a moth to flame. She sat on the couch, hesitantly staring at the screen, unable to look away. Ricky walked into the room slowly, pretending to act surprised, though he wasn't. An unbearable silence stretched between them. "You watch it too, don't you?" Ricky finally said, voice barely above a whisper. Clara's cheeks burned. She opened her mouth, then closed it, unsure what to say. I'm sorry," she muttered, standing up to leave, heart pounding in terror and shame. But Ricky grabbed her wrist gently. "Wait, what if we help each other?" His words hung in the air, charged with meaning she couldn't ignore. For a moment, Clara just stood there, frozen in place, mind racing. She should leave, she should scream, she should tell someone, but instead, she found herself nodding barely perceptibly because deep inside, part of her desperately didn't want to feel alone anymore. And in that moment, the fragile dam of forbidden restraint cracked open. Everything that followed began with a single decision, a decision born not out of lust, but out of deep, festering loneliness neither of them knew how to heal. One quiet holiday afternoon, when the rest of the house slept peacefully under the illusion of normality, Clara and Ricky shattered that illusion forever. With trembling hands, stolen glances, and hearts racing like wild animals, they crossed a line they could never uncross. The first encounter was hesitant, clumsy, driven by mutual fear and undeniable curiosity. But the shame that followed wasn't enough to stop them. Instead, it bound them tighter together. Two lost souls finding forbidden comfort in each other's brokenness. What they didn't know was that Noah was watching, and his discovery would soon set in motion a catastrophe so devastating none of them would ever recover. Noah stood frozen at the doorway, the scene before him burning itself into his mind in a way he could never erase. Claire and Ricky, entwined, vulnerable, oblivious to anything but each other, like something straight out of a nightmare. For a moment, he couldn't even speak. It was as if the world had paused, reality rejecting what his eyes were seeing. When Clara finally noticed him, she gasped, pulling away, scrambling to cover herself with trembling hands. Ricky's face went white with horror, stammering, "Noah, wait, it's not." But there were no words good enough to cover the sin now bleeding into the room. Noah's fists clenched at his sides, his stomach twisted in a nauseating knot. "You should be ashamed of yourselves," he spat, his voice cracking with a fury he barely recognized. "You're disgusting." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes. She tried to explain, her voice barely a whisper. "It just happened. We didn't plan this." Ricky, desperate, interrupted. "Please, Noah, we didn't mean for it to get out of hand. It just happened. We couldn't stop." And Noah cut him off with a look of pure revulsion. He turned to leave, to run downstairs and tell Kevin and Rena everything, to rip apart the fragile shell of this false family. But then Ricky spoke the words that changed everything. "What if you didn't have to tell?" Noah froze mid-step. "You're angry now," Ricky said hurriedly, standing, pulling on his shirt with shaking hands. "We get it, but think about it. We're all the same age. We've all had thoughts. We can help each other. You don't have to be alone." Clara sat there, sobbing silently, too ashamed to say anything. She didn't want this. She didn't want any of this. But Ricky's manipulation was fast, persistent, like a poison that seeps into your bloodstream before you realize you're dying. Noah stared at them, torn between disgust and a terrible, gnawing curiosity. "You're both sick," he hissed, but something in his eyes shifted. The loneliness, the confusion, the forbidden allure, all the same demons Clara and Ricky were battling. It was Ricky's final words that cracked Noah's weakening resolve. "It happens at this age. We're not monsters. We're just broken." And so, in that suffocating room, without fully understanding how or why, Noah made a decision that would damn all of them. A decision born not of lust, but of despair. Days turned into weeks. What started as a single moment of weakness blossomed into a twisted routine, a secret world that only they inhabited. The three of them became inseparable, not out of love, not out of passion, but out of shameful survival, bound together by a shared understanding that no one else could ever find out. They grew reckless, drunk on the secrecy, the danger, the fake sense of closeness they manufactured between stolen touches and whispered promises. They stopped seeing each other as siblings. They stopped seeing themselves as human. And then came the tapes. At first, it was Ricky's idea. "If we record it," he whispered one night, "we can watch it whenever we want." Clara had hesitated. Every bone in her body screamed it was a bad idea. But Ricky and Noah, both persistent, both craving the twisted validation, slowly wore down her resistance. The first recording was clumsy, amateurish, a cheap phone balanced precariously on a bookshelf. They giggled nervously, masking their horror with laughter, but once the line was crossed, it became easier. Soon they had a collection hidden deep in Clara's locked gallery, filed away under secret codes only they understood, videos that should have never existed. Their lives during the day continued as if nothing was wrong. Family dinners, movie nights, helping Kevin mow the lawn, playing board games while Rena laughed, blissfully ignorant that just hours earlier, her daughter and stepsons had been filming unspeakable things upstairs. But every lie piles up until it becomes a mountain, and eventually mountains collapse. It happened during Clara's 19th birthday party. The house was filled with balloons, banners, the smell of cake frosting, and the buzz of cheap pop music. Friends and family milled about. laughing and sipping sodas, oblivious to the tension simmering just under the surface. Clara, for a fleeting moment, thought she could have a normal day, just one day free from guilt. Her friend Donna, an excitable, nosy girl, was snapping pictures nonstop. At one point, she grabbed Clara's phone from the kitchen counter, giggling, "Come on, your camera's better." Clara, mid-conversation with Ricky, didn't notice at first. Donna scrolled through the gallery, searching for the camera app, but her thumb slipped, and she saw it. At first, Donna froze, thinking she was mistaken, but no, there was Clara, Ricky, Noah, the unmistakable images flashing across the screen. Her gasp was audible across the room. Before Clara could react, Donna shrieked with laughter, thinking it was some prank, then showed the phone to another friend, and another and another. The laughter turned into murmurs, then gasps, then disgusted whispers. Within minutes, the entire party shifted. Eyes that once looked at Clara with affection now bore into her with thinly veiled revulsion. The room buzzed with judgment. Disgusting, sick, the words weren't spoken aloud, but Clara could hear them just the same. Realizing what had happened, Clara ripped the phone from Donna's hands and fled the house. Ricky and Noah close behind, but it was too late. The videos had been seen, screenshots had been taken. The stain had already begun to spread. Word traveled faster than wildfire. Within hours, whispers circulated in their neighborhood. Parents pulled their children closer when Clara passed. Old friends stopped answering her texts. Noah and Ricky blamed her immediately. "You were supposed to lock the phone." Ricky screamed, his face red with panic. "You let her find it. You ruined us," Noah shouted, voice cracking with betrayal. Clara sobbed, tried to explain that it had been an accident, that she hadn't meant for any of this to happen. But Ricky was right about one thing. Regardless of intentions, the damage was irreversible. Meanwhile, Kevin and Rena remained blissfully unaware, still smiling, still hosting guests, until the messages started coming. It started with a single ding. Rena was standing near the punch table, laughing politely at one of Kevin's jokes, when her phone buzzed inside her purse. She ignored it at first, assuming it was a work notification, but it buzzed again and again and again. Frowning, she excused herself, slipping away from the party chatter, and pulled her phone out with a sigh. At first, she thought it was a prank. The first message came from an unknown number. No text, just a video file attachment. Curious and slightly annoyed, she tapped it open. The thumbnail alone made her stomach lurch, a dark, blurry image she couldn't immediately comprehend. But when the video started playing, Rena's world shattered. There was Clara, her daughter, her precious little girl, naked, tangled with Ricky, with Noah, doing things that no words could ever capture, doing things that obliterated every hope, every prayer Rena had ever whispered into the night for her daughter's happiness and safety. Her hands trembled so violently, she nearly dropped the phone. Her breath caught in her throat, choking her. She slammed the screen off, heart racing, panic clawing at her chest, but it wasn't over. Another message buzzed in, and another, different angles, different days, different horrors. Her inbox flooded with videos sent by faceless numbers, each one slicing deeper into her already bleeding soul. She backed against the wall, struggling to breathe. The sounds of the party around her became distant, muted, as if she were underwater, drowning in betrayal and shame. Kevin approached, concerned. "Rena, are you okay?" She shoved the phone into her purse, shaking her head violently. I need to go home," she gasped, her voice barely audible. Without waiting for a response, she pushed through the crowd, ignoring the confused stares, ignoring the murmurs that were already starting to rise around her. Every step she took felt like moving through quicksand. Every breath she took burned her lungs. The drive home was a blur, red lights, honking horns, her vision swimming with tears, her mind replaying the images she could never erase. Clara, Noah, Ricky, her Clara, the little girl she held through fevers, through nightmares, through the worst days of their lives, the daughter she worked herself to the bone to protect. How could she do this? Rena's hands tightened around the steering wheel until her knuckles went white. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't teenage rebellion. This was destruction. This was annihilation. And worst of all, it wasn't just Clara's ruin. It was Ricky's, it was Noah's, it was her family's. Their faces would forever be etched with this stain, their names dragged through every gutter, their futures obliterated before they even had a chance to build them. The rage that boiled inside Rena wasn't the quick, explosive kind. It was slow, it was simmering, it was boiling her alive from the inside out. By the time she pulled into the driveway, her body trembled with adrenaline. The house stood silent, mockingly ordinary under the soft evening sky. She left her purse and phone in the car. She didn't need them anymore. She needed only one thing now. She entered the kitchen, eyes scanning blindly until they landed on the butcher block. The knife glinted under the overhead light, as if calling to her. Her fingers wrapped around the handle with frightening ease. She moved without thinking, without feeling, a force of nature now, no longer Rena, the mother, the wife, the provider. Upstairs, muffled laughter floated down from Clara's room. It stabbed her heart like a poisoned dagger. They were laughing, as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't destroyed everything. Each step up the staircase was an act of will, her heart pounding so hard she could feel in her ears. Her breath came ragged, shallow. When she reached the door, she didn't knock. She didn't hesitate. She slammed it open. Inside, Clara, Ricky, and Noah froze mid-conversation. The laughter died instantly, replaced by wide-eyed horror. The sight of Rena standing there, knife in hand, eyes wild and broken, was more terrifying than anything they had ever seen in their darkest nightmares. "Mom, please," Clara cried immediately, scrambling to her feet, hands up in surrender. We know we messed up. Please, we're sorry." Ricky stumbled backward, voice shaking. "We didn't mean to. We can fix this, I swear." Noah, voice cracking, said, "Mom, we can leave. We'll go away. No one will know. We'll start over, please." But Rena only stared at them, breathing heavily, chest rising and falling as though she'd run a marathon. Her voice, when it finally came, was a low, guttural whisper, "You're dead to me." The words weren't shouted, they weren't dramatic, they were simply final. Clara's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Mom, please, we were stupid, we didn't think." Rena took one slow step forward. "You didn't think," she spat. "You destroyed us." The rage burst free in one terrifying motion. Rena lunged at Ricky first. The knife pierced flesh with a sickening sound. Ricky screamed, a sharp, high-pitched sound that barely lasted before he crumpled, clutching his side, blood pouring between his fingers. Noah shouted, rushing toward Rena to stop her, but she turned on him like a feral animal, stabbing him with brutal, devastating precision. Noah stumbled backward, eyes wide with betrayal and terror, falling against the wall as blood soaked his shirt. Clara screamed, a raw, animal sound, and fell to her knees beside Noah, trying to stop the bleeding with her bare hands. "Mom, please, please," Clara sobbed hysterically. "Stop. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." But Rena was beyond hearing, beyond reason. She was nothing but heartbreak now, nothing but despair. She stood over Clara, the knife dripping with her sins, her face twisted into something almost unrecognizable. "I can't see the daughter I raised anymore," she whispered brokenly. "You're not her, you're not her." Clara looked up at her with tear-soaked eyes, her voice trembling so badly it was barely audible. "I'm sorry, Mom, I'm sorry." Her last words, her final plea. Rena plunged the knife downward with a cry so full of agony that even she barely recognized it as her own. Clara gasped, clutching her chest, her body convulsing, her mouth moving in silent apology as her life ebbed away. When it was over, the room was deathly silent. The only sound was Rena's ragged, broken sobs as she dropped the bloody knife and fell to her knees amidst the bodies of her children, her heart, her world, now lying lifeless around her. She howled, a sound of pure devastation, a mother mourning the death of her children by her own hand. The bloodied floor, the shattered innocence, the crumbling of everything she had built, it crushed her under its immense, unbearable weight. Minutes passed, Maybe hours. Time meant nothing anymore. Finally, with trembling hands, she crawled to where her purse still lay abandoned in the car. She pulled out her phone. Her fingers, slick with blood, struggled to dial 911. When the operator answered, Rena's voice was a hollow shell. I need you to come. I killed them. My kids, I killed them. The dispatcher's voice was calm, soothing, trying to ask questions, trying to keep her on the line, but Rena barely heard. She stayed on the phone just long enough to give the address before she let it slip from her bloodstained hand. Then she sat on the front steps, waiting, rocking back and forth, murmuring the same words over and over again. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. But no apology would ever be enough. Not now, not ever. The sirens pierced the night like wailing ghosts, their blue and red lights slicing through the darkness. But Rena didn't move. She sat there on the front steps, her hands limp in her lap, caked with drying blood. Her dress, once a vibrant navy blue, was now soaked in shades of deep maroon, sticking uncomfortably to her skin. Her mind floated somewhere far away, detached from the horror she had unleashed. The squad car screeched to a halt in front of the house. Officers burst from the vehicles, guns drawn, shouting commands. She barely registered, hands in the air now. Slowly, mechanically, Rena lifted her bloodied hands. She offered no resistance when they rushed toward her, slamming her face first onto the concrete. The roughness of it scraped her cheek, but she didn't flinch. The cold steel cuffs snapped around her wrist with a finality that felt strangely merciful. As they hauled her to her feet, an officer glanced into the open doorway and froze. His radio crackled as he stumbled back. Face pale, dispatch, multiple victims, send ambulances. It's bad, it's real bad. The officers tried to shield Rena from the sight as they led her away. But she didn't look back. She didn't have to. The images were already burned into her mind. The way Ricky's eyes had gone wide in shock. The way Noah had gasped her name with betrayal on his lips. The way Clara, her little Clara, had whispered, I'm sorry, before slipping away. Nothing could be worse than the hell inside her own head. They placed her into the back seat of the cruiser. The door slammed shut, sealing her fate. As the car pulled away from the house that had once been her sanctuary, Rena closed her eyes and let the tears come, silent, endless. Meanwhile, Kevin's phone rang. He had been called away on a sudden business emergency just half an hour earlier, leaving the birthday party reluctantly after kissing Rena goodbye. The number was unfamiliar. Hello, Mr. Kevin Carter? Yes, who is this? This is Detective Wallace, Crestview Police Department. Sir, I'm afraid we need you to come back immediately. It's about your family. Kevin's heart skipped a beat. What happened? Is Clara okay? Rena? My boys. The detective's voice was gentle but firm. Sir, there's been an incident. You need to come to Crestview Memorial Hospital as soon as possible. Kevin didn't remember the drive back. He didn't remember blowing through two red lights or almost colliding with another car. All he remembered was the growing pit of dread inside him, a black hole that threatened to swallow him whole. When he arrived at the hospital, two officers met him at the door. Their faces said it all. No, Kevin whispered, stumbling backward. No. They let him inside anyway, their hands gentle but insistent. He saw the bodies first, covered in white sheets, lined up side by side in the sterile, cold morgue. He recognized Ricky's messy hair poking out from the sheet, Noah's familiar sneakers, and then Clara, not moving, her face too pale, too still. Kevin collapsed against the wall, sliding down onto the floor, sobbing like a broken child. His heart ruptured inside his chest, and he wailed, a sound so raw it made even the hardened officers turn away, ashamed to witness such unbearable grief. Ow! He gasped between sobs. How could this happen? They told him everything, not in cruel words, not in graphic details, but enough to destroy him. His wife, his children, all gone, all because of secrets he never saw. The trial came swiftly. The media devoured the story with ruthless hunger. Mother slaughters daughter and stepsons in rage over leaked tapes. Family ties severed by forbidden lust and blood. Newspapers, TV stations, social media, Everyone had an opinion, but no one knew the real story. Not like Rena, not like Kevin. When Rena stood in court, she didn't plead insanity. She didn't cry for sympathy. She stood tall, or as tall as her broken body would allow, and confessed everything. She told them about Tony's death, about raising Clara alone, about the second marriage she thought would save them, about the accidental discovery, about the videos, about the betrayal, about the rage that consumed her. She didn't sugarcoat it. "I failed as a mother," Rena said, her voice soft but unwavering. "I failed as a wife. I failed as a human being, and now I must live with that." Kevin sat in the front row, clutching a handkerchief in white knuckles, watching the woman he had once loved reduced to a hollow shell. When they showed the videos in court, the evidence, Kevin broke down again, burying his face in his hands as the images flickered across the screen. He didn't blame Rena. He didn't know who to blame. Maybe life, maybe death, maybe the black hole of loneliness that had devoured them all. The court deliberated for only a day. The judge's voice was cold, almost mechanical when he delivered the verdict. "Rena Carter, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." There were no cheers, no gasps, only a heavy silence as Rena was led away in handcuffs. She turned back once, not to the crowd, not to the reporters, to Kevin. Their eyes met, and in that brief moment, no words were needed. Forgiveness was impossible, but understanding horrible. Aching understanding passed between them. Kevin left the courtroom feeling like a ghost, like the world had ended and no one had noticed. In the aftermath, Kevin sold the house. He donated everything Clara had owned, her clothes, her books, even her childhood toys, to charity. He burned the family photos in a private ceremony on a lonely hilltop, letting the ashes scatter into the wind. He left Crestview behind. He moved to a small town where no one knew his name, where no one whispered when he walked into a diner, where he could pretend for a few hours each day that he hadn't once had a family, hadn't once believed in second chances. Meanwhile, in prison, Rena faded into obscurity. She spent her days scrubbing floors, folding laundry, eating tasteless meals under the buzz of fluorescent lights. She refused visitors. She refused appeals. She spent every night lying awake on a hard, narrow bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, replaying that night over and over until the memories bled into dreams, and the dreams bled into nightmares. The last thing she did every night before sleep finally claimed her was whisper the same broken prayer. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." But in the hollow, merciless void she had created, there was no one left to hear it. Only silence, only ghosts, only the unbearable weight of what could never be undone. Thank you for staying with this heartbreaking story until the end. If you found value in this narrative about the devastating consequences of grief, isolation, and poor choices, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful human stories that remind us how fragile life can be and how important it is to stay connected with our loved ones through their darkest moments. Remember, sometimes the greatest tragedies aren't born from hatred. They're born from love twisted by pain and isolation.